The New York Giants kept it close with the Los Angeles Rams, but at the end, they just couldn't seal the deal. We look at the numerous head-scratching reasons why, as well as what the Giants continue to do wrong all season long. That's coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code in all lowercase letters, LockedOnNFL, for a first deposit match up to $100. What is up, New York Giant fans? Welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, P-Train, credentialed member of the New York Giants media. You can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Patricia_Traina, and of course on Instagram and Threads at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA. And shout out to all my everydayers, my newcomers, my Blue Crew community members, and a special shout out. This was requested of me actually as I was leaving the game on Sunday night. I think this person's going to know who probably requested it, but a special shout out to Jamie Kiley, who I understand listens to the podcast every day. Is one of my everydayers. Jamie, thank you for your support. Happy to be with you guys. Unfortunately, we don't have a Giants one to talk about, but the Giants did keep it interesting against the Los Angeles Rams. They made a game of it. I got to admit, I thought it was going to be a blowout. I thought it was going to be an ugly loss. And, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, what are we going to talk about now? But the Giants, they kept it close, 26-25. Now, that being said, there were some things that obviously keep coming up, things that we've got to talk about, some head-scratching decisions. So we'll talk about why the Giants were not good enough to beat the Los Angeles Rams. We'll talk about the coaching issues, because this year, I've got to tell you, for as impressed as I was last year with the Giants coaching staff and the job they did, this year, the bloom is really coming off the rose. And we'll talk about some of that. And then we'll also talk about what we have learned from the Giants in this penultimate game of the 2023 season. So again, happy to have you with us here on the podcast. Let's get into it. All right. Giants, as we have found out, every single loss this year, they are just not good enough to overcome mistakes. And this game was once again filled with a lot of mistakes. Now, I'm going to save the coaching mistakes for later. But I want to talk about things like execution. There were drop passes. For example, Saquon Barkley had 2. Daniel Bellinger had 1. Sterling Shepard had 1. I believe Jalen Hyatt had 1. So there were at least 5 drop passes that they just weren't able to overcome. The penalties. Oh my goodness. The penalties. Let's talk about that. In the fourth quarter alone, the Giants had, by my count, 4 critical penalties that could have influenced the outcome, or actually probably did influence the outcome of the game. Daniel Bellinger was called for holding. That wiped out a 47-yard Jalen Hyatt reception. John Michael Schmitz got nailed for holding, which wiped out a 15-yard Tyrod Taylor run. Darnay Holmes on special teams, he was caught holding on a Rams punt. And that, of course, cost the Giants 10 yards. 10 yards, by the way, that they really could have used, because that was on the drive that ultimately resulted in Mason Crosby's failed 54-yard field goal attempt. So just imagine if they hadn't lost those 10 yards, maybe Mason Crosby makes that field goal. And then you also had a hold on Cordell Flott, which gave the Rams a first down and extended a drive that ended with Kyron Williams running for a 28-yard touchdown. So the Giants just not good enough to overcome mistakes. You know, we saw also throughout the game, we saw Tyrod Taylor botch a quarterback center exchange. There was an interception. I mean, you can't have this. Now, I don't expect, obviously, the Giants to play a perfect game every single week. But the mark of a good team or a team on the rise is that if they do make a mistake, they are able to overcome it. Adoree Jackson had a missed tackle again. What's going on with that? I mean, is he trying to come back here, or is he trying to get himself, with no interest from this team? So these mistakes just keep popping up week after week after week, and they're just not good enough to overcome them. The Giants are at a point now, seriously, where they have to play as close as perfect a game as possible if they are to give themselves a chance to win. And, the defense, for what it's worth, I thought the defense played really well for the most part. There were a few missed tackles. I don't remember how many off the top of my head, and my count's probably not going to agree with the final count anyway. But they were pretty good with getting after quarterback Matthew Stafford. Now, they have 4 sacks total, so the pass rush was getting home. There were 7 quarterback hits. They had 2 interceptions. Dane Belton, by the way, who came in for an injured Jason Pinnock, had himself a really good game. So good for Dane Belton. There were, 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. So the Giants defense came to play for the most part. Bobby Okereke had another, productive game, led the team in tackles with 10, had a sack and a half, 1 tackle for a loss, 2 quarterback hits. So he had a solid game, but just not good enough because, again, the Giants, here was the concern coming in. If they were going to get into a scoring shootout against the Rams, they were going to need to keep up with them. The defense, for the most part, even though they didn't play a perfect game, they did their part. The offense could have done more. I thought Tyrod Taylor missed a few passes that should have been there. Some of the question, one throw in particular, I think it was the one where he short hopped it to Saquon Barkley. I forget what down it was, but it was in the second half. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? So just not good enough. And the problems to me continue to stem on the offensive side of the ball. And, I don't know what has happened to the offense that, it has just gone so in the opposite direction. I mean, last year it wasn't great, but, it was at least functional. Can you blame the injuries? Perhaps. The change in personnel? Maybe. But, just not enough plays made by the offense. And we'll talk about the coaching decision, which I don't think helped the offense for what it's worth. So we're going to talk about that actually right after this. Hey, Giant fans, just because the Giant season is coming to an end very soon doesn't mean that the fun of playing daily fantasy sports with PrizePicks has to stop. Because right now, with basketball season underway, PrizePicks gives you the chance to pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League that was created specifically for combo projections featuring 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. And did you know that you can also play along with friends and family by checking out the community tab? PrizePicks is so easy to play. Just pick 2 or more players, predict their stats, and sit back and see how they perform. It takes less than 60 seconds to make an entry. And when you play with PrizePicks, you'll enjoy quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and a wide selection of player and stat types. So what are you waiting for? Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use this promo code LockedOnNFL, that's in all lowercase letters, by the way, to get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that URL is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and that promo code in all lowercase letters is LockedOnNFL for your first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, P-Train, and Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you all day, every day, covering the top sports stories of the day, with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe for the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And coming up tomorrow on the Locked On Giants podcast, I'm going to have a list. I'm starting to make lists for the end of the year, but I'm going to have a list of who's been helping themselves and who's been hurting themselves regarding a possible spot on the roster next year. So that's going to be scheduled to be tomorrow's show. Hope you will check that out, as well as all our programming here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Let's get back to the Rams loss, the Giants loss against the Rams. And I'm going to talk about coaching now. And, look, I've always been brought up to respect people, and the job they do and, just kind of try and see why they do what they do, even if I don't agree with it. And I've got to be honest with you folks. I don't know. And I say this every week, it seems, but I don't know what this coaching staff is doing. There are just so many issues that pop up, from the play calling to, this personnel decisions. And I just don't understand what they are doing. So let me give you some examples. I'm going to talk about personnel decision right off the bat. Now, you guys know I love Sterling Shepard. I think the world of him. And, good for him for being on the roster to end his career maybe the way he wanted to. But can somebody please explain to me why, now 2 weeks in a row this has happened, Sterling Shepard really doesn't get on the field until the last play of the game, towards the end of the game, when the game is on the line. And then twice now, he has had that opportunity and has come up short. Now, carrying Sterling Shepard on the roster is one thing, but why are you giving him a game day uniform if you're waiting to use him until the end of the game, if he's not contributing on special teams? I mean, what is the point there? Are you turning this guy into a mascot of sorts? Is this a kind of a reward? I mean, I look at this and I almost view this as like giving a draft pick a scholarship. And if that's what the Giants are doing here, if they're rewarding somebody for, exceptional behavior, you know what? Give them a gold watch and a medal and a pat on the back and maybe a bonus and call it a day. Why take away snaps from somebody who else, like a Paris Campbell, who maybe could be helping you on special teams, or who can maybe help you on offense? I'm not sure I understand the logic there. And again, I like Sterling Shepard, but it pains me to say that, and because it's true. So I don't understand that at all. Now, here's another thing I didn't understand. The Giants had Mason Crosby attempt a 54-yard field goal. Now, in his career, Mason Crosby has made his share of 54-yard field goals. But let's flash back to Thursday when the coordinators spoke and how Thomas McGahee, the special teams coordinator, made a comment. And I'm going to paraphrase what he said. He was asked about Mason Crosby's kickoff leg, which isn't very good, by the way. I don't think he had any touchbacks, if I'm not mistaken, in this game. But anyway, he said, look, he's an older kicker. Even John Elway, couldn't throw the ball as far and with as much power at 38 as he could at maybe 23. All right, I get that. But here's what I don't get. Mason Crosby wasn't kicking until last week, Monday, Christmas Day. That was his first time kicking in an NFL game. To ask Mason Crosby to go out there and make a 54-yarder, and I understand he made a 52-yarder against Philly, but 2 more yards you're adding on to it, and then in those swirling winds on top of it, to ask Mason Crosby to make that kind of a kick, that was asking a whole lot. And of course, it didn't work out. The kick was short, and it was wide left. Now, leading up to that, I'm going to question the play call, because there was a second down play that, they called a draw for Saquon Barkley. And, oh, by the way, the Rams ran a stunt against the Giants offensive line that hasn't picked up a stunt all year. Okay. I mean, you sit there and you're watching this, and then Saquon got stuffed for -2 yards, which set them back. And you're saying to yourself, okay, why didn't you try throwing the ball? Because worst case scenario, the ball, goes incomplete and the clock stops. But, still to run it, and then on top of it, you have to face a stunt that your offensive line can't pick up and hasn't picked up all year. Where's the sense in that? I mean, goodness gracious. I'm laughing because it's funny, but it's not funny. But, it just blows my mind. Um, Another thing I don't understand. The Giants were never really out of this game. So why was the offensive pass to run distribution so grossly tilted to the passing game? 41 pass attempts to only, I think it was 20 rushing plays. Let me just double check that. I think it was 20. Yeah, 20 rushing plays, of which, by the way, Saquon Barkley only had 12 of those rushing attempts. What are they doing with Saquon Barkley? If he's supposedly their best player, what are they doing with him? Why aren't they, putting more on him? I don't understand that. I don't understand why the need to throw the ball 41 times in a game that really was never out of reach. So that I don't get either. I don't understand why on that play where, they scored a touchdown, the Giants scored a touchdown, it is. They went for the point after. There was a penalty on the Rams, so the Giants got a do-over. And, let's, instead of tying the game, let's go for 2 points. Let's get greedy here. Now, some of you might say, well, they were 5-10 at the time. And what did they have to lose? Well, if you're playing, are you playing to win the game, or what exactly is your point here? So, long story short, they didn't make the 2-point conversion. And, you got to cash in on those opportunities. Tyrod Taylor, some of the play calls, like I said, just head scratchers. The execution just not there. The penalties, the holding penalties, what are they doing there? How are they being coached, these guys? Or were they, or do you make the case that the officials were nitpicking? And speaking of the officials, just real quick, I want to interject this. In the beginning of the game, Brian Daboll had to challenge 2 plays on the Rams. I believe it was on the first drive. Now, fortunately, he won both of them. So that meant he only had one more challenge left. But here's my thing with the officials. The officiating is that bad now that you have to, that you have to blow challenges that early. That's like blowing a timeout early. And, look, we all know, I think, what happened in the Dallas-Detroit game. But, and I don't, I understand the officials have a tough job. But the officiating this year has just been garbage. I'm sorry. I know they have a tough job to do, but some of these calls and missed calls and judgment calls, it's like, I was talking with Ed Valentine, and Ed Valentine quoted, I think, a retired official that he had spoken with. And he said, initially officials were taught to fish for, I guess, the bigger fish, the sharks, and not the minnows. And now it seems like they're going after the minnows. So, I just don't understand what's going on with the officiating, just not very good this year. A lot of head scratchers. But I don't want to blame the officiating for the Giants losing this game, because I always believe that if you make the plays you're supposed to make, it doesn't matter how many calls you have that go against you, you're going to overcome them. But much like the mistakes the Giants have made, they're not good enough to overcome some of these calls that are going against them that might be head scratchers. And the fact, like I said, that they had to waste 2 of their challenges early in the game the way they did, I was like, come on. What's going on here with the officiating? What are you guys looking at? So that's a pet peeve. So, bottom line is the coaching, didn't help things. Brian Dable, for all the right moves and decisions he made last year, a lot of them have just gone out the window. And I don't know why that is. Is it because of all the injuries? Is it because, you don't have the talent level that you thought you were going to have? And by the way, shouldn't like a really good coaching staff be able to adjust? If they're teaching them in the classroom, you would think so, right? But yet the Giants, for whatever reason, I mean, you saw a botched snap between Tyrod Taylor and John Michael Schmitz. I mean, I I just don't get it, and it's been frustrating to watch, and I think coaching has been a very, very big part of why this Giants team is where it's at right now, which, by the way, where it's at right now is they are still in the 5th spot in the draft order. I think there's a way they can move up, but they need a whole bunch of things to happen. Even that, the Giants can't control their own destiny, right? So anyway, they have one more game coming up against the Philadelphia Eagles, but we'll talk about that later in the week. Coming up next, I want to talk about what we have learned about this Giants team through 16 games with one more to go, so don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, the regular season is wrapping up very soon, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and score big this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. Again, I'm your host, Patricia Traina P-Trade. Thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if you're watching YouTube, your first watch of the day. I'm coming to you. I'm recording this right after the Giant game, so I've been home a little bit now since the Giants lost to the Rams, and just a frustrating game. I mean, it was an entertaining game. It was an interesting game, but frustrating because you see all the mistakes that get made, and you sit there and you shake your head and you wonder just what might have been. But it's a lost season. Let's call it what it is. So that being said, what have we learned about the Giants based on this week's play? Well, I spoke about it in the last segment about coaching and how it does make a difference, and how some of these decisions that have been made by head coach Brian Dable, the plays that have been called by Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, the inability of the offensive line to pick up stunts. This has got to be addressed. They can't go forward like this. Dable, to his credit, said, there was a play that he'd like to have back, and that was that Saquon Barkley run for -2 yards that got stuffed. But, come on. The biggest thing that I see with this Giants team, and I go back and forth trying to figure this out, they knew that they were out of the playoff hunt, basically on Christmas Day. That's when they were officially mathematically eliminated. So that said, what do you want to be these last couple games? Do you want to be a team that competes to win? Or do you want to be a 5-10 team that takes chances so that you can see what you have going forward? And I can't help but feel that the Giants kind of waffle in between. Sometimes I watch them and I say, oh, they're a team that definitely wants to win. And that's fine. And then there are times that I watch them and I say, oh, this is just a team that's evaluating for next year. And I just wonder if they ever, really define that identity. I know in the past, Joe Shane once said that, we want to rebuild and still be able to compete. And I think to a degree you should be able to do that. But you just watch the Giants and you just say, what are they doing? What are they trying to be? Are they trying to be, a team that's looking ahead to next year, taking advantage of the fact that they're out of the playoffs? Or are they just looking to win to keep the mood up? Or just what is the purpose? I don't know if they know. I know I'm not sure what it is because I see them go back and forth. And it's a head scratcher for sure. Wink Martindale, folks, he needs to be back. Now, I know there's that Jay Glazer report from a few weeks ago hanging over the Giants' head that that Wink and Brian Dable don't get along, that there might be a parting of the ways. I don't know if it's true. Okay, I don't think it is. I think it's just more of a result of, with all the losing going on, maybe the pressure is on more people and maybe tempers are shorter. So that could be it. I don't know. But whatever differences Wink Martindale and Brian Dable might have, let's hope they work it out and Wink is back next year. Because if you think about it, you know, if they move on from Mike Kafka, which I believe they will, if you could keep Martindale on board to run that defense, and he's done a good job running the defense for the most part. I think we could say, for the most part, the defense has been the superior unit of the three on this Giants team this year. You keep him to run the defense. Then if the Giants bring on a new quarterback or a new offensive coordinator, which is expected, Dable can get more involved with that, leave the defense to Wink, special teams, leave that to McGahee or whoever, ends up coaching that. And I think you have a good setup there. I would not want to see Wink leave, certainly not because of a disagreement or, a personality clash. I think that's going to result in a lot of upset players on the defensive side of the ball if that happens. So Wink definitely needs to be back, in my opinion. And then one last point I'll make. I get the feeling more and more, and I don't know why, and I hope I'm wrong, that Saquon Barkley really isn't in this team's plans moving forward. I mean, I am just mystified by the usage or lack thereof of Saquon Barkley. If he is your best player, why would you not put the ball in his hands more? Why would you not have him on the field more? What are you trying to do? Usually, when you take a guy off the field or you cut back on his snaps, you're doing so because he's either injured or you don't want him to, get injured so that you don't have to pay him an injury settlement later on, when you part ways. So I'm really not sure what the Giants are doing with Saquon Barkley. His use all season long has been a mystery to me. So, is he still hurt? That could be a possibility. But I don't know what they're trying to do there. And I really wish, somebody would explain it to me. You ask Dable about that, and he gives you a brush off answer about, oh, we've got plays designed for him, but we didn't get to them. Okay, why are you not getting to them? Is there a sequence? Is there a order? Might be a question that I'll pop in there if I can. So the Giants, one more game to go against the Eagles next week at home. Not expecting a win. Could it at least be competitive? Let's hope so. If they can upset the Eagles, even better. I'm not counting on it, but we'll see. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Giants. Don't forget to check in tomorrow when I give you my list of guys who have helped themselves for next year and those who have hurt themselves for next year. So that's coming up tomorrow on the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. I'm Patricia Traina, and I will see you tomorrow, Giant fans.